People love to preach about a woman's place. But I learned something that night. A mother's place is wherever her child's spirit is breaking. And mine was breaking right in front of me. My name is Valerie Warren, and before I tell you what happened at that table, take a breath with me, because nothing about that night felt real until it was too late to stop it. Before I go on, tell me the time you're watching this from in the comments. I want to know who's keeping me company tonight. The fourth slap didn't ring out like the first three. It landed heavy, sharp, final, like a verdict. Lillian's palm cracked across my son's cheek with the confidence of a woman who believed the world belonged to her. The room didn't gasp. Nobody flinched. They just watched. Bryant didn't look at her. He didn't move. He just swallowed whatever was left of the man he used to be. Cassandra leaned back in her chair, smiling into her glass the way some people smile into secrets. "He'll live," she murmured. "Weak men always do." Lillian turned toward me, her mouth twisting. "I feed you and your disgusting mother," she said, slicing the words through the air like she wanted them to bruise. Heat rose in my chest, not the kind that makes a woman cry, the kind that wakes something old and dangerous in her. Across the table, forks clinked, wine poured, laughter bubbled, not over anything funny, but over the comfort of knowing no one in that room feared consequences. Influence will do that. It'll make monsters feel like royalty. Hours earlier, Bryant had shown up at my door. He didn't come inside, didn't sit, didn't talk. He just leaned against the frame like the house was the only thing keeping him upright. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled, his smile brittle. I asked if he was okay. He said he'd had a long week. But when he hugged me, his chest trembled in a way a grown man's chest doesn't tremble unless he's been carrying pain too heavy to name. Now I knew exactly what he swallowed before letting me go. Back at the table, one of Lillian's cousins smirked at me, as if waiting for me to shrink. Another whispered something that made the whole left side of the table choke on laughter. I didn't shrink. I didn't blink. I watched the red handprint rise on my son's face like a warning carved in flesh. And something inside me didn't bend this time. It shifted. Lillian tilted her head. "What? You got something to say, Valerie?" Cassandra chimed in. "Some people forget whose house they're sitting in." But it wasn't their house. Not really. It was a house built on borrowed dignity and inherited arrogance. I pushed my chair back. No rush. No fear. No trembling. A hush fell, not out of respect, just curiosity. "Where are you going?" Lillian scoffed. I didn't answer. I crossed the room with the steady steps of a woman who finally understood the cost of silence. Pulled my phone from my purse, dialed a number I had never dialed in their presence. Behind me, Cassandra snickered. "Oh, this should be cute." Lillian added, "Call whoever you want. Nobody here is afraid of you." They weren't. They should have been. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, deep, steady, unhurried. I didn't explain the slaps. Didn't explain the humiliation. Didn't explain the table full of witnesses who enjoyed the show. All I said was, "Can you come?" When I walked back toward the dining room, nothing had changed at the table. Not a seat shifted. Not a fork paused midair. They were still eating, calm, casual, comfortable, like watching a grown woman slap her husband 4 times was the same as watching someone pass the salt. Lillian leaned back in her chair, rubbing her thumb across the rim of her wine glass as if she needed to savor her own power. Cassandra adjusted her shawl, lips curled with amusement. That woman didn't just enjoy humiliation. She collected it. Bryant kept his head lowered, not out of fear anymore. Something else, something I hadn't seen on his face before. A kind of exhausted acceptance that frightened me more than the slaps had. "Oh, he'll be fine," Cassandra said, lightly waving a hand. "Weak men bruise on the inside, not the outside." Lillian snorted a laugh. "He's lucky I only used my hand." I stood near the doorway, taking all of this in. My heartbeat didn't rise this time. My breath didn't shake. The call I had just made sat like a stone of clarity in my chest. Years ago, this same table had been different. Back then, Lillian used to reach for Bryant's hand when she laughed. She used to lean her head on his shoulder when she thought no one was watching. She used to blush when he introduced her to someone new, the first time she came to my house. She was so quiet I had to ask her twice if she wanted tea. Her "Yes, ma'am" barely made it out of her mouth. She sat with her knees pressed together and her smile tucked inside her hands. She complimented everything, my curtains, my cornbread, even the photo of Bryant holding a toy truck at 6 years old. She was trying. I saw that clearly, but everything changed the moment Cassandra stepped in. Cassandra moved near them like a shadow that didn't need light to stretch across a room. She started with little comments. "My daughter deserves the best. Don't let him make you work too hard. Pretty girls don't stress." And somehow those small seeds grew something bitter. I remembered the first real shift, a Sunday dinner at their place. Lillian corrected Bryant's pronunciation of a word in front of 6 people, then corrected it again, then again. Cassandra laughed and said, "He'll learn eventually." It wasn't the correction that told me something had changed. It was the pride in Cassandra's smile. Now, looking at the table again, that same pride lived in every corner of her face. Bryant reached for his glass of water, his fingers trembling slightly. Lillian watched the tremble and laughed under her breath. He heard it. He always heard it. I stepped farther into the room. Cassandra glanced toward me. "Back already?" That was quick. Her tone carried the easy amusement of someone who believed nothing, and no one could disrupt her comfort. "I'm still waiting on a call back," I said. Lillian smirked. "From who?" "Your prayer group." She dabbed at the corner of her lips with a cloth napkin. "Valerie, you really should stop making dramatic exits. Nobody here is checking for you." Another cousin on her side added, "She probably called one of those little friends from church." Laughter followed, low and lazy. I didn't respond. Silence was the only thing I could trust in rooms like this. Words are wasted on people who enjoy pain too much to recognize dignity when it stands in front of them. I walked past my son, gently touched his shoulder. His skin felt warm beneath my fingertips, too warm. He didn't look up, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. Behind me, Cassandra said softly, "Some women don't know when to stay in their lane." Before I could turn, my phone vibrated in my hand. One long buzz. Only one person had that tone. I moved away from the table again, lifting the phone to my ear. The deep male voice spoke calmly, the way a man speaks when he's already made up his mind. "Send me the address." Lillian laughed louder than everyone else at the table, a high, sharp sound that cut through the room like she wanted it to be heard, wanted it to land, wanted it to sting. I swear, if I didn't work as hard as I do, This entire house would fall apart, she said, leaning back in her chair like a queen addressing a room of servants. Cassandra smirked with a kind of pride only a mother who raised arrogance well could carry. My daughter's always been independent. She doesn't need anyone. Men usually slow women down anyway. The others nodded, not because they agreed, because agreeing was the easier thing to do. Bryant kept his eyes on his plate. Lillian saw it and chuckled. Oh, he knows I'm telling the truth. Some people just exist to be supported. She waved her hand toward him the same way she'd wave away a fly. Look at him. He wouldn't survive without me. I stood by the doorway, her words settling on my skin like dust. She wasn't talking to Bryant. She wasn't talking to the room. She was talking at me, using him as the weapon. Cassandra added softly, some men are born cushioned. They only learn strength through women like my daughter. Her tone slid across the table like oil, slick, heavy, suffocating. Their voices blurred into a steady stream of belittlement, and for a moment, I didn't see the Lillian standing at this table. I saw the one from 3 years ago wearing a soft pink dress, eyes shining when she introduced herself to me. I'm so honored to meet you, Mrs. Warren, she'd said, hands clasped like she was praying not to make a bad impression. That girl wasn't here tonight. The change didn't happen overnight. It happened the way rust eats through metal, quietly, steadily, until the whole thing collapses. The night I knew things were shifting was a warm Friday evening about 6 months after the wedding. I had gone to pick up food from a small restaurant downtown. I parked my car and was walking inside when I saw 2 familiar silhouettes near the corner. One leaned against the wall. The other leaned into him. Lillian's hands were on another man's chest. The man's hands were wrapped around her waist. And then, slow, deliberate, they kissed. Not a heated kiss. Not a sloppy kiss. A kiss that looked rehearsed. Familiar. She pulled back first, smoothed her hair, adjusted her dress, walked away quickly, like it wasn't the first time. I didn't confront her that night. I confronted my son. He paced the floor in my living room for 10 straight minutes, running his hands through his hair, breathing hard. Mom, please don't say anything, he whispered, not because he didn't believe me, because he did. I'll talk to her. I'll fix it. Just give me time. But time didn't fix it. Time made her bolder. I blinked back into the present as Lillian clinked her glass against Cassandra's. Some people don't know how exhausting it is being the only capable one, she bragged. Her mother nodded. You carry this house. You carry this marriage. You carry everything. That's why you can correct him however you want. Correct. That's what they called the 4 slaps. Bryant shifted slightly in his seat, the movement small, but enough for Cassandra to snicker. See? Even now, he's sensitive. Lillian leaned forward, her voice dropping into something colder. Valerie, go sit down. This table was peaceful before you started taking things too seriously. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Something inside me had shifted too, quietly, without announcement. From the far window, a sudden glare washed across the table. A set of headlights swept through the dining room, bright and slow, pouring white light over their plates, their glasses, their confidence. Conversation stopped. Forks froze midair. Someone whispered, "Who's that?" The headlights didn't move away. They grew brighter, closer, and then the engine shut off. The front door opened without a rush, without a sound meant to draw attention. It simply opened, quietly, deliberately, like the man walking through it knew he didn't need noise to shift a room. Everett Douglas stepped inside with the calm presence of someone who built his life on discipline, not chaos. A stillness fell over the dining room. Not fear. Recognition. Cassandra's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Her smirk dropped. Lillian's shoulders stiffened, the arrogance draining from her eyes faster than the color from her face. The cousins looked at each other, the air around them tightening like a belt pulled one notch too far. Everett took 3 steps forward, surveying the room with an expression that didn't rise or fall. It just held everything: disappointment, confusion, steady control. He was a man who'd seen too much in life to be startled, but enough to be unsettled by what he walked into. His eyes didn't go to his wife. They didn't go to his daughter. They found me. I felt it in my chest before I felt it in my throat. Something shifting, something heavy settling. He nodded once, soft but direct, as if greeting someone he trusted. "Valerie," he said, voice even. Lillian blinked rapidly. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice rose too quickly, fragile at the edges. Everett didn't answer her. His attention stayed on me, studying my face as if trying to read everything I hadn't said over the phone. Bryant looked up too, confusion flickering over him like a shadow unsure where to land. Cassandra cleared her throat. "Everett, this is unexpected. You didn't tell us you were coming home tonight." His gaze slid to her only for a fraction of a second. "I wasn't," he replied, tone flat, unbothered. "But I received a call." A call. He didn't say from whom. He didn't need to. The tension deepened, tightening around Cassandra's shoulders, wrapping itself around Lillian's wrists like invisible cuffs. Their certainty, so loud seconds ago, wavered. I stood still, watching him, and my mind drifted briefly to the first time we ever met. It was at a charity banquet almost a decade ago. A warm evening filled with overly sweet champagne and people showing off generosity that didn't always come from the heart. Everett had approached me because I'd helped an elderly woman whose dress zipper broke in the restroom. It wasn't a moment worth bragging about, but he noticed. Later that night, I overheard him telling Cassandra, "That woman has dignity." He didn't know my name then, but he saw my character. I never forgot the way he said it, quiet, assured, like dignity was worth more than anything else in the room. Now, standing here, I saw the same look in his eyes. "Where is he?" Everett asked finally. His voice cut a straight line through the room. Bryant lifted his head slowly. Everett's expression softened, very slightly, but enough to show he cared. He stepped closer. "Son, look at me." Bryant obeyed. Everett's eyes traced the red marks on his face, the imprint of his daughter's hand. The imprint that said everything without a single word spoken. Everett inhaled once through his nose, a breath he held deeper than he needed to. His jaw tightened, but not with anger, something steadier, colder, more controlled. Lillian got up quickly. "Dad, it's not what it looks like." He was being dramatic. "And sit down," Everett said. Not loud, not aggressive, just final. She sat. Cassandra stood halfway, trying to insert herself. "Everett, you know how sensitive Bryant can be. Your daughter didn't do anything." He didn't even look her way. His eyes came back to me, holding mine with a weight that felt both grounding and heavy. "Valerie," he said, voice low but edged with steel, "you, outside. Let's talk." The night air outside the house felt heavier than it should have, like it carried all the things no one inside dared say. Everett closed the door behind us with a soft click. No force, no drama, just enough sound to separate what was happening out here from what was still rotting in that dining room. He stood still for a moment, not looking at me, not looking at the house, just breathing, as if steadying something inside himself he hadn't had to confront in years. "I told you to call me if you ever needed my help," he finally said, voice quiet, almost tired. "But coming to rescue you from my own family? I never imagined this." He didn't shake his head. He didn't sigh. He just looked at me, really looked, and I could see that his words weren't disappointment. They were disbelief. The kind that comes from being blindsided by the people you trusted with your name. "They've hidden a lot from you," I said softly. Everett didn't respond immediately. He stepped farther into the yard, hands tucked into his pockets, the porch light catching faint silver in his hair. "I believe they were good," he said. "Flawed, yes. Stubborn, yes. But good. At least decent enough to know right from wrong." His throat tightened on that last word, barely noticeable, but enough to show this wasn't a father excusing his daughter. This was a man confronting a truth he didn't want to see. He turned slightly toward me. "You called me," which tells me things have gone far beyond what anyone tried to tell me before. Tried. He knew. Somewhere inside him. He knew he'd ignored signs. I didn't want to interfere in their marriage. I said, I didn't want to make things worse for Bryant. Everett nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what it meant for a mother to hold back out of love. For a moment, we both just stood there. The hum of a distant car, the faint rustle of leaves, sounds that felt too gentle for the truth sitting between us. Then he spoke again, quieter, more personal. "I travel too much, more than a husband or father should. I built everything I have from the ground up, and somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that providing was the same as being present." That was the first time I'd ever heard him admit a flaw. I trusted them to carry themselves with dignity. He continued, "I assumed they understood the weight of the name they carry." He let out a brief breath through his nose. "I didn't think I had to worry about arrogance or cruelty. Not from them." There was no anger in his voice, just a steady, grounded disappointment that cut deeper than shouting ever could. He glanced at the house again, not with fear. He wasn't afraid of what he'd walked back into. It was something else, a quiet realization that the people inside had grown into strangers while he wasn't looking. "My father was too trusting," he said, shifting into the memory without warning. "Lost everything twice because he gave the wrong people too much room to move. I promised myself I'd never be like him." A faint, bitter smile touched the corner of his mouth. Funny how we become exactly what we run from. It wasn't self-pity. It was self-awareness. He stepped closer to me, his voice steady again. "Valerie, I know your nature. I know your character. You wouldn't have called unless something crossed a line." I swallowed gently. It did. He nodded, and I should have seen it sooner. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in recognition of his own negligence, of his own trust misplaced. "But I'm here now." The porch light flickered slightly, casting a narrow glow between us. He inhaled deeply, grounding himself. Then he faced me fully, eyes sharp with purpose. "Valerie," he said, voice low, firm, unshaken, "what have they been doing?" For a moment, I didn't speak. Not because I didn't know where to start, because I knew once I started, nothing between Everett and the people inside that house would ever be the same again. He waited, silent, still, a man bracing himself for an answer he already suspected would cut. They've been treating Bryant like he's beneath them. I said, finally, not once or twice, consistently, publicly, like hurting him is a hobby they take pride in. Everett's jaw shifted, a small movement, but enough to show he was listening with more than his ears. I told him about the comments, how Lillian chipped at Bryant's confidence bit by bit, how Cassandra encouraged it like it was tradition. I told him how they turned correction into punishment, how the slaps weren't the beginning but the peak of something that had been growing for months. They humiliate him, I continued, voice low but steady, not by accident, not because of a bad day, by choice. Everett didn't interrupt. He didn't blink. He didn't move. I could see the tension building behind his calm expression, a controlled rise, slow and deliberate, like water heating on a stove. They treat me the same. I added, not with disagreements, with disdain. They talk like I'm furniture they don't approve of. Something shifted in his eyes then, a flicker of recognition, maybe guilt, but I wasn't done. I hesitated, not out of fear, but because the next part would cut deeper than anything else. Everett, my voice caught just slightly. I need to tell you something else. He turned fully toward me. Say it. I inhaled once. Steady. I saw Lillian with another man. Everett didn't react immediately. It was as if the night paused for his permission before moving again. He blinked once, slow. When, months ago, I kept my tone factual, not emotional. This wasn't the moment for trembling words. I was at a restaurant downtown. She didn't see me. I saw her kiss him. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't confusion. I opened my phone, went straight to the photos. No hesitation. I took these. I handed the phone to him. He didn't take a step backward. He didn't gasp. He didn't raise his voice. He just stared at the screen, the porch light carving shadows across his face. After a long moment, he exhaled, slow, controlled, careful. I thought she was changing, he said quietly. A while back, I noticed her tone getting sharper. The way she spoke to people she once respected, the entitlement. His voice tightened. I told myself she was stressed. I told myself marriage was overwhelming her. I told myself her mother was rubbing off on her too much. He looked at the photos again. I told myself everything except the truth. His voice didn't shake, but something inside it cracked, barely audible, but enough to show he was confronting betrayal not just as a father, but as a man who believed he raised someone better. He handed the phone back to me, careful with the movement, like the truth deserved respect even when it hurt. She kisses him like she knows him well. He said, not angrily, but with a depth that cut deeper than fury. This isn't new. No, I said softly. It isn't. He looked toward the house then, toward the windows glowing warm with the laughter of people who didn't know their night was already splitting open. I trusted her, he murmured, in ways a father should be able to trust his child. His throat tightened again, and I trusted Cassandra to guide her, not poison her. The wind moved slightly, rustling the leaves above us. Everett straightened. A calmness settled over him, quiet, focused, absolute. He turned back to me with eyes that no longer carried disbelief, only certainty. Valerie, He whispered, voice low and final, "This ends tonight." When Everett and I stepped back inside, the dining room had changed in a way only attentive eyes could notice. The laughter had quieted, replaced by a strange, stiff silence. Forks hovered, untouched. Lillian's cousins exchanged uncertain glances. Even Cassandra's posture, usually relaxed and smug, seemed to tighten ever so slightly. Everett didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask anyone to move. He simply walked forward with the calm weight of a man whose authority didn't need permission. He moved behind his daughter's chair, slow, steady, with the kind of controlled composure that made the room shrink around him. Lillian sat upright now, hands clasped together like she was trying to remember how to look composed. Her earlier arrogance flickered across her face, but didn't find enough strength to land. Cassandra adjusted her position. "Everett, darling, you didn't have to step out like that. We were just—" He lifted a hand. She stopped speaking mid-sentence. His eyes remained fixed on Lillian. "You will be held accountable tonight." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled into the room, like the final nail of truth. Lillian blinked fast. "Accountable? For what, Dad?" "We were having a normal dinner." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Normal?" Her throat tightened. "Well, yes." He stepped closer. "Tell me your definition of normal, Lillian." The cousins shifted uncomfortably. One put her fork down. Another looked toward the door, as if calculating whether it was safer to leave or stay. But what caught my eye wasn't them. It was the staff. The servers who had been moving quietly between tables earlier now stood at a distance, near the hallway, watching Everett with eyes that held something unexpected. Relief. Not fear. Relief. As if the arrival of this man, this specific man, meant the truth finally had a voice strong enough to stand in the room without being crushed. One of the staff, an older woman who had stiffened at the sound of each slap earlier, let out the smallest exhale, almost like her lungs had been holding tension she couldn't release before now. She looked at Everett with gratitude, not loyalty, and that told me something. They had seen more than we knew. They had witnessed things they couldn't speak on. And tonight, they believed he might finally listen. Everett turned his attention back to his daughter. "I watched your husband's face when I walked in," he said. "I saw marks on him. I saw shame. I saw a man trying to disappear in a room where he should feel safe." Lillian shook her head quickly. "Dad, don't do this. Bryant exaggerates everything. He's sensitive, and tonight he was—" "Quiet," Everett said, not raising his tone. She swallowed hard. Cassandra placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Everett, she didn't hurt him. You know how these boys can manipulate with—" "Enough," he said. "It wasn't a shout. It wasn't harsh. It was final." Cassandra's hand slipped away. Lillian's face twisted, small sparks of panic replacing her practiced confidence. "Dad, can we please go upstairs and talk? This isn't something we need to address in front of everyone." He didn't move. "On the contrary, this is exactly where it needs to be addressed." Bryant's eyes flickered toward me. He didn't speak, but something inside him straightened, quietly, carefully, as if the first thread of hope had pulled through the cracks. Everett's jaw tightened as he continued. "I built this family on principles you and your mother have chosen to ignore. I will not allow cruelty to wear my name." Cassandra gasped softly, offended by the accusation. But before she could respond, A tiny sound broke through the tension. A vibration. Soft. Sharp. Lillian's phone, resting beside her plate, lit up with a bright white glow. She grabbed it quickly, glancing down. Her face drained instantly. A single message filled the screen. Account restricted. Lillian stared at her glowing phone screen like it had betrayed her. Account restricted, she whispered, the words barely forming. Her thumb trembled as she tapped at the notification again, as if pressing harder would change the reality staring back at her. Cassandra leaned over. Let me see. She snatched the phone, eyes narrowing at the message, then sharpening into something sharp, almost panicked. Everett, she said, voice tight. There must be some mistake. Everett stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. No mistake. Cassandra blinked rapidly. You froze her accounts without discussing it with me. He didn't turn toward her. Yes. Lillian's breath hitched. Dad, you can't just... He finally faced her, expression calm, but edged with something she wasn't used to seeing from him. Finality. I can. I did. And it won't be reversed. Her mouth opened and closed, searching for the confidence she used to wear so easily. None of it came. Everett moved to the head of the table, resting one hand on the back of a chair, not to lean, but to ground himself. You've lived on money you didn't earn, he said. Money that was meant to support, not inflate. Money that should have taught you responsibility, not arrogance. Cassandra scoffed. We are not children. No, he said, but you behave like it. A hush fell over the room. Thick, tense, electric. He continued, voice steady. You want luxury? Work. The words were sharp, but not angry. They were carved from something older, something earned through years of sweat instead of entitlement. Lillian's face tightened. I do work. You work my accounts, Everett corrected. You delegate. You supervise. You appear. But you have never carried anything from the ground up. His voice dropped lower. You have never struggled long enough to understand gratitude. Cassandra's chin lifted. Everett, I supported you through everything. He looked at her then, truly looked. No, Cassandra, you benefited from everything. There's a difference. She flinched. The staff near the hallway watched quietly, their faces still marked with the same subtle relief I'd noticed earlier. They weren't enjoying the moment. They were witnessing something they'd hoped for but never expected. Everett took a slow breath, grounding himself before he spoke again. I started working at 15, he said, the words heavy with memory. Before school, after school. I spent years building something from nothing, carrying crates, sweeping warehouses, working during storms because I needed every hour, not because anybody forced me, but because I wanted a life better than what I knew. His voice softened, not with weakness, but with truth. That work shaped me. It taught me respect. It taught me humility. It taught me that people are people no matter what name they carry or what house they walk into. He looked at his daughter. But you never learn that. Lillian's eyes welled. Anger, not remorse. So you're punishing me? I'm correcting you, Everett replied. The same way you thought you were correcting Bryant. The room tightened around the comparison. He straightened his back. You will learn how to live without depending on me. No more allowances. No more unlimited cards. No more privileges. Cassandra rose abruptly. You can't do this to your own family. He didn't move. I just did. Lillian's breath grew ragged. Daddy, please, we can talk upstairs. Just us, not in front of— No, his tone clipped clean. This is where it belongs. In the open. In the truth. Bryant sat silently, shoulders curved slightly inward, eyes dark and unreadable. The slaps had faded into faint lines, but the humiliation had not. Everett turned to him, expression shifting, softer, heavier. Bryant! My son lifted his gaze slowly. Everett stepped closer, his voice gentling in a way that made the room dim around him. I need to speak with you. Everett guided Bryant outside, not with force, not with urgency, but with the quiet steadiness of a man who understood that some conversations needed open air. The night had cooled, carrying a soft wind that brushed against the porch like it recognized what was about to unfold. Bryant stood at the bottom step, shoulders shaking just barely. He kept his face turned away from the house, as if ashamed to let those inside see even an inch of truth. Everett didn't crowd him. He stopped a few feet away, giving my son space to breathe, to gather, to decide how much of himself he could finally let spill out. Bryant, he said gently. My son inhaled, but the breath collapsed halfway. His hand lifted toward his face, then fell before it reached the bruise. He tried to speak, twice, before any sound came out. It crushed me, he whispered. Everett stepped closer. What did? My marriage. The words tore out of him, like something he'd been holding in his fist too tight, for too long. His shoulders shook harder. I kept telling myself it would get better, that I just needed to be patient, that the Lillian I married would come back. He pressed both hands into his face, dragging his fingers through his hair like he was trying to pull himself together and falling apart at the same time. I stayed because I loved her. I stayed because the beginning was beautiful. She was beautiful. She saw me. Everett didn't interrupt. Bryant let out a raw, shallow laugh, one without any humor. Do you know what's crazy? Our honeymoon was perfect, genuinely perfect. The memory hit him hard enough to soften his voice. We went to a little coastal town. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant. She laughed at everything. She held my hand everywhere we went. She woke me up early just to watch the sunrise. She said it made her feel like the world was restarting just for us. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring into the dark yard, as if the memory was playing on a distant screen only he could see. I believed that woman was mine. I believed that was who she really was. He swallowed painfully, but then her mother visited more, gave advice she didn't need, reminded her of everything wealthy women shouldn't tolerate, told her she was marrying down, told her she needed to control the house or she'd lose respect. His voice went smaller. That's when she started changing. The complaints, the comments, the corrections. Another breath cracked. And then the hands. All three of us stood there, the truth stretching out between us like a wound finally exposed to air. Bryant lifted his head slightly, as if gathering courage from someplace deep and hidden. I stayed because I didn't want to disappoint you, Mom. His voice shook again. And I didn't want to disappoint you either, Mr. Douglas. I thought leaving meant failing. I thought divorce meant I gave up too soon. Everett's expression tightened with something heavier than anger, recognition. Marriage isn't supposed to destroy you, he said quietly. And staying in something that breaks your spirit isn't loyalty. It's survival. Bryant's breath hitched. I kept thinking I just needed to be stronger. Everett shook his head. Strength has nothing to do with letting someone hurt you. The wind shifted softly, brushing leaves along the walkway. Bryant wiped his face with the back of his hand. Slow, steady, like a man preparing himself for the first honest step he'd taken in years. He straightened, not fully, just enough. Enough to reclaim his voice. Enough to reclaim his name. He looked Everett in the eyes, then at me. His voice didn't tremble this time. I want a divorce. When we stepped back into the dining room, the air shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough for everyone seated to sense a different kind of energy radiating from Bryant, an energy that hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. His shoulders weren't squared, but they weren't slumped either. His chin didn't rise, but it didn't bow. It was the quiet posture of a man who had finally made a decision that stopped wrestling him from the inside. Lillian looked up first. Her eyes darted from him to Everett and then to me. "What did you three talk about?" she asked, voice sharper than her earlier confidence. Bryant didn't answer. He stepped forward, moving until he stood near the center of the table, not to make a scene, but to make a statement. Everett remained behind him, hands clasped, expression unreadable. Cassandra frowned. "Bryant, speak. You're making us uncomfortable with all this silence." He exhaled slowly, then met Lillian's eyes. "I want a divorce." The fork in her hand clattered to the table. "What?" Her voice shot up an octave. You want a divorce." She leaned forward as if she needed the words repeated. "You're leaving me?" Her shock wasn't heartbreak. It was disbelief, pure, stunned disbelief that the man she belittled, slapped, dismissed, and controlled was suddenly standing on his own feet. "You're joking?" she scoffed. "You're doing this to embarrass me because my father is here." Everett didn't react. His face stayed calm, still, observing, analyzing the unravel he already saw coming. Bryant shook his head. "This isn't about your father. It's about me." Lillian's lips curled. "Bryant, you can't handle life without me. You need me. You know you do." He didn't flinch. "No," he said quietly. "I needed peace. I needed respect. I needed a partner, and I haven't had that for a long time." Her eyes widened, then narrowed, fast, sharp, searching for a weapon to use. "So, you're blaming me for your weakness?" "It's not weakness to want to be treated like a human being." The words weren't loud, but they were steady in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. As I watched him, something inside me tugged at a memory from years ago, my son standing stubbornly in the front yard, refusing to come inside until he finished fixing the chain on his bicycle. He had scraped both knees, but he kept pushing, solving, working through the frustration with a gentleness that never left his spirit. The same gentleness I saw now, resurfacing through all the damage. He wasn't fighting her. He was reclaiming himself. Lillian's anger rose quickly, fueled by entitlement, bruised ego, and shock. "You don't get to walk away from me. I'm the one who decides things in this marriage." Everett's voice slipped into the room, not forcefully, but firmly. "No, you don't." She froze. Cassandra straightened. "Everett, this is impulsive. He's emotional. He's quiet." He didn't even look at her. Bryant continued, voice low but unbroken. "I stayed because I wanted us to work. I stayed because I thought leaving meant I was giving up. I stayed because the beginning was real, and I didn't want to lose it." His throat tightened, but I lost myself instead. Lillian slammed her palm on the table. You can't do this to me. You hear me? You can't. Everett stepped behind her chair, his presence sharp enough to cut through her noise. Enough, Lillian. She turned toward him, desperate. Dad, tell him he's overreacting. Tell him he can't just end things without talking to me properly. Nathan looked at her like he finally saw her without the layers of privilege and performance. Then his voice dropped, low, steady, final. Your marriage will end with dignity or disgrace. Choose. Lillian pushed her chair back, so hard it scraped across the floor. I'm not signing anything, she snapped, eyes blazing. Divorce? From him? Absolutely not. Bryant didn't move. He didn't argue. He simply watched her unravel with the calm of a man who no longer feared the outcome. Cassandra stood up next, her anger rising faster than her daughter's. This is ridiculous, she spat. You're humiliating my child. Everett, how dare you stand here and let this nonsense happen? Everett didn't turn toward her. His voice was low, steady, anchored. The nonsense began long before tonight. Cassandra let out a disbelief laugh. Sharp, bitter. So now you're blaming me? You're taking their side. Her hand flew toward me. Her son is soft. That's the problem. He can't handle a strong woman. Everett's eyes hardened. Stop. But Cassandra didn't. She stepped closer, pointing at Bryant. Weak. That's what he is. Weak men need pressure. Strong women push them forward. Lillian has been doing the work his own mother failed to do. A hush fell over the table. My chest tightened. Quietly, silently, Lillian leaned into the support, emboldened. Exactly. Divorce is a joke. He's not leaving me. He can't. Everett's voice cut clean through the noise. He can. And he is. She scoffed. We'll see. Cassandra's voice rose even higher. This marriage isn't over because some boy is having a meltdown. Get a grip, Bryant. Her voice cracked into a raw, ugly pitch, one that made the nearest staff member step back uneasily. Everett's tone shifted. Not angry, not loud, but final. That's enough. She laughed at him. You don't get to silence me in my own home. It is my home, he said, and finally turned to her fully. The room froze. The weight of his authority, rarely used, never abused, pressed the air flat. Cassandra's bravado faltered for the first time. Excuse me, she whispered. Everett pressed a small button on his phone. Within seconds, 2 uniformed security personnel appeared from the hallway. Calm, disciplined men, not the dramatic type. They did not raise their voices or hands. They simply waited for instruction. Cassandra's eyes widened. Everett, what are you doing? You are disorderly, he said plainly. You're escalating the situation, and I won't allow it. I am your wife, she screamed, voice cracking. You are out of control, he corrected, and I won't tolerate chaos. Her breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. You're throwing me out? In front of all these people. Escort her to the guest house, he instructed. Make sure she has access to what she needs. She will remain there until I speak to her. Cassandra staggered backward. Everett, don't you dare, don't you? The guards gently guided her toward the hallway. She fought them at first, then froze when she realized screaming only made her look smaller. Lillian watched, horrified, as her mother, the woman who fed her arrogance like oxygen, was taken away in silence. The table sat frozen. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one breathed normally. I glanced at Lillian. Her face was draining, shifting from rage to fear. Not fear of losing status, not fear of divorce, fear of losing the foundation her mother built beneath her. Her eyes glassed over, and for a moment she looked younger, like the girl she used to be before entitlement hardened her edges. That girl resurfaced for only a second, and then disappeared again. Everett returned to the center of the dining room. His voice carried no triumph, no pleasure. Accountability begins with removing the loudest influence. Now we address the behavior. The room remained motionless. A faint vibration broke the silence. Lillian looked down at her phone. Another notification flashed across the screen. Her lips parted. All remaining allowances canceled. All luxury accounts closed. The dining room felt different now. Emptier, not because people had left, but because the noise they once carried had finally gone silent. The arrogance, the entitlement, the loudness that used to fill every corner had been stripped away layer by layer until all that remained was truth. Everett placed the divorce papers on the table, not as a threat, not as punishment, but as a door Bryant could finally choose to walk through. Bryant reached for the pen. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look for permission. He didn't check the room to see who was watching. He simply signed, quietly, deliberately, like a man reclaiming the parts of himself he thought he had lost forever. Lillian watched with her hands trembling, not out of grief, but out of panic, the kind of panic born from losing power she once assumed she owned. "Bryant, don't do this," she said, voice cracking. "You can't just end things because you're emotional." "This isn't emotion," he said softly. "It's clarity." Her breath hitched. "You are throwing away our marriage." "You threw it away first," he replied. She slammed her hand on the table. No, you don't get to rewrite this. Your mother poisoned you. She turned you against me." Everett stepped forward, but Bryant lifted a hand gently, not to stop him, but to show he didn't need protection. "My mother didn't break me," Bryant said, his voice calm, steady, gentle in a way that made the room feel smaller. "You broke yourself." Lillian froze. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't weaponize his pain. He didn't celebrate her downfall. He simply stated a truth she could no longer outrun. "You hurt me," he continued. "You humiliated me. You slapped me in front of your family, like I was a child you were disciplining." His tone stayed controlled. But that wasn't the worst part. She swallowed hard. "Then what was? You made me believe it was normal." The words landed heavier than any slap she had ever given. Cassandra would have defended her daughter, would have shouted, pushed, redirected the blame. But Cassandra wasn't here. And without her mother's shield, Lillian was exposed. Her cruelty, her insecurity, her hollow pride. She turned to me instead, jaw trembling. "This is your fault," she spat. "You think you're better than me because you raised a good man, because you made him soft." My son looked at me then, and for a moment I saw him at 12 years old, standing in our small kitchen, gripping a toy toolbox, telling me he would fix the cabinet hinge because men take care of things. I remembered bending down, touching his cheek, and telling him a good man doesn't need wealth to have value. His value comes from who he is, not what he owns. That boy, the gentle one, the stubborn one, the one who led with his heart, was standing in front of me again. He turned back to Lillian. "My mother didn't make me soft," he said. She made me decent. Lillian's face collapsed, not with understanding, but with a realization she didn't want to face. Her power was gone. Her status was gone. Her mother was gone. Her allowances were gone. And now the man she thought she controlled was gone too. Everett closed the folder of sign papers with a soft, final tap. It's done. Lillian backed away from the table slowly, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Dad, you're really going to stand there and let him destroy this family? Everett's voice remained composed. The only thing being destroyed here is the illusion of what you thought this marriage was. She shook her head rapidly. No, Dad, please don't do this. But he didn't answer her. His attention had already shifted to Bryant. He stepped closer, speaking in a tone that carried something deeper than authority, something like respect. Bryant, he said quietly. My son lifted his eyes. Everett nodded once, as if acknowledging a strength he hadn't seen in him before. Do you want a position in my company on your own merit? The weeks that followed felt different for all of us, but especially for Bryant. Everett made good on his promise. He didn't hand my son a position as a favor or as pity. He put him through the same review board every new hire had to face. 3 interviews, 2 skill assessments, a probationary period, and Bryant passed every stage on his own merit. By the time he started the job, the whispers inside the company had already shifted. He wasn't the son-in-law. He wasn't the man married to the boss's daughter. He wasn't the one who took the slaps. He was just Bryant Warren, a man finally standing on his own feet. The first morning I visited his new workplace, I didn't walk in like a proud mother showing off her child. I walked in quietly, watching him before he saw me. He stood beside 2 coworkers, discussing project files spread across a long table. His voice was steady. His posture was confident, and the others listened to him, not because of his last name, not because of his connection, not because of fear. Because he had earned their respect. He caught me watching and smiled, a real smile, not the strained, careful one he used to wear beside Lillian. Mom, he said, walking over, you came at the right time. We're going on lunch break in 5 minutes. I saw it in his eyes, a clarity, a peace, a groundedness that had been scraped raw during the marriage and was now returning piece by piece. The man standing in front of me felt new and familiar at the same time. How's it treating you? I asked. He glanced around the office. It feels good to be useful again, to be valued for who I am, not for what someone expects me to be. That sentence held the entire weight of his marriage. He didn't have to explain the difference. He didn't have to mention Lillian or Cassandra. His freedom spoke for itself. Later that week, I overheard a conversation between 2 employees. That new guy, Bryant, he's sharp. One said, yeah. The other replied, doesn't act entitled like some people who walk in with connections. If they only knew, while Bryant rebuilt himself, Lillian and Cassandra faced a different reality. They were not homeless. They were not suffering. They were not destitute, but they were no longer pampered. Cassandra applied for 3 different management roles she was convinced she deserved. She received one polite rejection after another. It wasn't because Everett blocked her. He didn't need to. Entitlement is loud, even on paper. Lillian tried to return to her old department at her father's company, only to be told politely, but firmly, that her position had been reassigned and she would need to apply through the normal process. Her expression when she heard that news was something I didn't witness directly, but the staff described it easily. She looked like the ground itself betrayed her. One whispered, for the first time in her life, she had to work without shortcuts. For the first time in her life, she had to stand without her mother's voice directing the world around her. What neither of them understood was that Everett wasn't punishing them financially. He was confronting something deeper, their relationship with power, value, and work. And while his wife and daughter scrambled to adjust, Everett focused entirely on restructuring the home he had allowed to rot. But my focus was on Bryant. One afternoon, I walked into his office and saw him leaning over the desk, explaining something to a new intern. His tone was patient, gentle, steady. The intern nodded quickly, grateful for guidance. Bryant looked up and saw me, offering that same warm smile again. I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. Real, quiet, bone-deep relief. We left the building together, the sun setting behind us, painting long shadows across the walkway. Bryant carried himself differently, lighter, freer. When I returned home that evening, I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet, warm, familiar. Then I saw it, a handwritten envelope sitting neatly on my doorstep. No return name, no explanation, just my name written in careful script. I carried the envelope inside and closed the door gently behind me, the quiet of the house settling around my shoulders like a familiar shawl. The handwriting on the front was careful, measured, like every letter had been shaped with intention. I recognized it even before I opened it. Everett Douglass wrote like he spoke, steady, disciplined, and direct. I slid a finger beneath the flap and unfolded the paper, letting the soft crackle of it fill the room. Valerie, it began. Not Mrs. Warren. Not something formal or distant. Just my name. I owe you an apology I should have given years ago. I inhaled slowly. When Lillian first brought Bryant home, I saw a good, decent young man. The kind of man I would have been proud to call a son long before this. But I trusted my family more than I trusted my own instincts. The words struck something tender in me, an old ache I didn't know I still carried. I believed they were who they used to be. I didn't see who they had become. I didn't want to see it. The room stayed still. The house listened with me. I want you to know something, he continued. You did right by your son. You protected him with patience, with strength, and with a dignity most people never learn. You didn't fight chaos with chaos. You fought it with character. My throat tightened. You showed me what dignity looks like in real time. And it humbled me. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the wood warm beneath my palm. Everett wasn't a man who apologized easily, not out of pride, but because he didn't speak without purpose. He had always been the type of man who held himself together by will and habit. Seeing him acknowledge fault, it carried weight. I'm writing this because there is a truth I've never told you. The letter went on. A long time ago, I lost my first business. Not because I lacked intelligence or skill or strategy. I lost it because I was arrogant. The page felt heavier in my hands. I had investors who trusted me, employees who depended on me, a family who believed in me. And I thought I couldn't fail. That arrogance cost me everything. I imagined a younger Everett, ambitious, overworked, proud, watching a dream crumble because he believed he was untouchable. I spent years rebuilding from nothing. That loss taught me humility. It taught me discipline. It taught me that character is more valuable than power. The next line slowed me. I thought I taught that lesson to my family, but I see now that arrogance crept in again, just not in me, in them. I pressed the heel of my hand gently against the corner of my eye. But I'm awake now, Everett wrote, and for whatever it's worth, I am grateful to you for being the person who helped me see clearly. I let the sentence settle. I will guide them through whatever consequences come next. I will teach them what work really means, and I will not allow them to harm your son again. The ink darkened slightly on that line, as if he pressed the pen harder. You stood tall in a room meant to belittle you. You showed restraint when anyone else would have raised their voice. You carried yourself with the same dignity my father used to describe as wealth of the soul. I hope you know that. My breath caught. I respect you deeply, Valerie. Everett. I folded the letter carefully, letting the edges align the way he'd written it. The quiet around me felt different now, warmer, fuller, carrying the soft weight of understanding. I placed the letter on the table and closed my hand over it gently. Just as I did, footsteps approached my door. Then a familiar voice, soft, steady, called out, "Mom." Bryant stepped inside with a breath that sounded lighter than anything I'd heard from him in months. Not the fragile kind of light, not the forced kind. The real kind, the kind that came from a man finally standing on solid ground after crawling across broken pieces for too long. He closed the door behind him gently, the same way he used to when he was a boy, trying not to wake me after sneaking extra ice cream from the freezer. That softness, that gentle consideration had always been part of him, and seeing it return felt like watching color come back to something that had faded. He held up a small bag. "I brought groceries," he said, smiling in a way that reached his eyes. I laughed softly. "Since when you bring groceries to my house?" "Since I decided you're not cooking alone tonight," he answered, and something in his tone, playful, warm, told me he was healing. He walked into the kitchen and set everything down. Fresh vegetables, a pack of cornbread mix, a small container of seasoned chicken from the butcher he likes. "We could make that stew you used to cook every Sunday," he said. "Used to." I raised a brow. He chuckled. Okay, you still do. I just didn't want to walk in here empty-handed. There was no tension in his voice, no fear, no second-guessing, just my son. While I prepped the vegetables, he chopped onions with the confidence of a man who finally had enough room to breathe. "You seem lighter," I said softly. He paused, knife midair, and nodded. "I am." I stirred the pot gently. "Talk to me." He leaned against the counter. No slouch in his shoulders. No downward gaze. Just presence. "Mom, thank you," he said, "for not abandoning me emotionally, for letting me come to the truth on my own, for not making me feel like a failure." "You were never a failure," I replied. He swallowed. I felt like one. He looked at me then, really looked. "I stayed in that marriage because I didn't want to disappoint you, and I thought leaving meant I wasn't strong enough." I set the spoon down and touched his arm. "Strength isn't staying where you're dying. Strength is walking out alive." His eyes glistened, not with pain this time, but with clarity. The stew began to simmer, filling the kitchen with a smell that wrapped around us like a memory we'd been missing. Bryant grabbed bowls from the top cabinet and set the table like he used to when he was younger, humming a little tune under his breath. We sat down to eat. For the first time in a long time, we laughed, genuinely laughed. Not the tense laughter people use to survive a moment. The kind two people share when the worst is finally behind them. At one point, he leaned back and said, "It feels good to enjoy dinner again." I knew what he meant. This dinner, simple, quiet, warm, was everything the other night at Lillian's family table wasn't. No slaps, no insults, no performance, no entitlement crowding the air, just peace. After we finished eating, Bryant washed the dishes while I dried them. A small, easy rhythm, a mother and son sharing space without the weight of anyone else's cruelty sitting between them. When the last dish was put away, he turned to me. "I think I'm going to be okay," he said softly. "I know you will." He exhaled, a long, steady breath, as if releasing the last piece of something he no longer needed to hold. Standing there, watching him, I felt something I had spent this entire story searching for. Not revenge, not victory, not triumph. Relief. Pure, quiet relief. As he walked toward the living room, I looked at him, really looked at him. My son. Lighter. Healing. Free. And I understood something I didn't when all of this began. She thought wealth made her untouchable. She didn't know humility made him powerful. And in the end, the only thing I wanted wasn't revenge. It was my son back.